I never thought I'd find myself in this situation. It's like something out of a bad movie. One minute you're living your normal life, and the next, you're a character in a twisted tale of betrayal. I'm Mark, and this is my story about discovery, heartbreak, and ultimately revenge. Jane and I had what I thought was a solid marriage. We met in college, bonded over our shared love for music and the arts, and it felt like a fairy tale when we said our vows. But as the years went by, things started to shift. Our once vibrant relationship dulled under the weight of routine and unfulfilled dreams. I worked hard as an accountant, earning decent money, while Jane pursued her passion for singing. Unfortunately, she was struggling to find her footing in the competitive world of music. Bills piled up while her dreams seemed to slip further away. The first sign that something was off came through subtle changes in her behavior. Jane became distant, often glued to her phone, her eyes flicking with a nervous energy whenever I walked into the room. I put it down to stress from her career. After all, trying to make it as a musician in a big city isn't easy. But as time wore on, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. I'd ask her about her day, but she'd brush me off with vague answers. "Oh, just the usual," she'd say, her tone dismissive. I started to notice other things too. She was going out more often, claiming it was for networking. "You know how it is, Mark. I need to meet people in the industry," she'd exclaim, her voice laced with a hint of annoyance whenever I expressed concern. I knew she was working hard, but something about it felt off. The late nights, the unexplained absences, it all began to build a wall between us. The tipping point came one evening when I decided to surprise her. I left work early, picked up her favorite dinner, and headed home, imagining the smile on her face. As I approached our apartment, I noticed a car parked outside that didn't belong to us. My heart raced as I stepped inside, the door creaking open to reveal a scene that shattered my world. There in our living room was Jane, laughing and leaning against the wall. Man I didn't recognize sitting too close for comfort. My stomach dropped as I realized he was a musician, one of those struggling types she was always talking about. The moment she saw my face, the laughter evaporated, replaced by panic. The guy bolted out the back door like a thief in the night. "Mark, oh my God, I can explain." She stammered, but I was already reeling from the reality that my wife was cheating on me with some loser who couldn't even pay their own bills. "Explain what, Jane?" I shot back, my voice trembling with rage. "You've got a lot of nerve bringing this scumbag into our home." I felt everything collapse around me, and it was all I could do to keep myself from exploding. Her frantic excuses spilled out. It was just a mistake. "You've been so busy." But I couldn't take it anymore. In that moment, my heart turned to ice. I realized that I had been so focused on supporting her dreams that I had ignored the cracks forming in our relationship. I stood there staring at her as she tried to spin her web of lies, but it was too late. The trust that had once held us together was shattered beyond repair. I remember feeling a strange clarity amidst the chaos. As I walked out of the apartment, the world blurred around me. I didn't know what my next steps would be, only that this wasn't the end. I had been wronged, and somehow I would make things right for myself. If she thought she could betray me and come out unscathed, she was in for a rude awakening. The days ahead would require planning, and I began to envision a strategy, a kind of revenge where I would not just survive but thrive. I would show her the consequences of her actions, and I was determined to come out on top. Once the shock of the discovery faded, a storm brewed inside me. I felt furious, betrayed, and humiliated. But above all, I felt a burning need to regain control of my life. Jane had made her choice, and now it was time for me to make mine. I knew that I couldn't remain in that apartment, trapped in a situation that was suffocating me. I needed to think clearly, away from the memories that haunted our home. I moved in with my sister, Sarah. She was supportive and understanding, listening to my frustrations without judgment. One evening, as we sat on her couch, I poured my heart out. "I just don't understand why she would do this to me. I've always been there for her." "Mark, you can't take it personally," she replied softly. "She made her choices. You deserve better than that." Her words resonated with me. I had been so focused on Jane's dreams and happiness that I neglected my own needs and desires. It was time to flip the script. I threw myself into my work and focused on my career. I took on extra projects and stayed late at the office, channeling my anger into productivity. It didn't take long before I got noticed. My boss, a no-nonsense type named Greg, began to give me more responsibilities. As I climbed the corporate ladder, my salary increased, and I found myself in a position I had only dreamed of before. I was finally becoming successful in my own right. But Jane hadn't disappeared from my thoughts entirely. I was aware of her social media updates, photos of her at bars with friends, the obligatory selfies with a guitar. Each post was a reminder of her carefree life while I was digging my way out of the emotional wreckage she had left behind. The more I saw her flaunting her supposed freedom, the more motivated I became. I couldn't let her think she had won. As the months passed, I began to develop a plan. I wouldn't just find success, I would ensure that she felt the weight of her choices. I reached out to a few acquaintances I had met in the business world, contacts who could help me with something I had been thinking about for a while. I wanted to turn the tables on Jane. It wasn't enough for me to just succeed professionally. I wanted her to see what she was missing. I started working on a music-related project, a charity concert for struggling artists. It was ambitious, but I had the connections and the drive to make it a reality. I began to compile a list of musicians, many of whom were well known and had been in the industry longer than Jane. I even got in touch with a few local radio stations to promote the event. My goal was to create a platform that could give struggling musicians, like the one Jane had cheated with, a chance to shine. Along with my professional aspirations, I began to reinvent myself personally. I started hitting the gym, shedding the pounds that had snuck onto my frame during my years of focusing solely on Jane. I invested in new clothes and revamped my style, something I hadn't prioritized before. I wanted to transform not only my career but my entire self. I wanted to be someone that Jane would see and realize what she lost. The big day of the charity concert arrived, and I was feeling a mix of excitement and anxiety. The venue was buzzing with energy, and I watched as the musicians set up, their faces glowing with anticipation. As I walked through the crowd, I spotted familiar faces among the attendees, friends, colleagues, and even some of Jane's acquaintances from the music scene. I felt a surge of adrenaline as I thought about how this was not just a concert, it was my statement. When the show began, I took a moment to soak it all in. The artists performed with passion, and I reveled in the happiness that filled the air. I could see people enjoying themselves, but more importantly, I felt a sense of power I hadn't experienced in ages. This was my moment, not Jane's, not anyone else. I was reclaiming my life and proving that I could rise above the ashes of our failed relationship. That night, the event was a resounding success. We raised a substantial amount of money, but more than that, I gained a newfound confidence. As the last act took the stage and the crowd cheered, I couldn't help but think about Jane. Would she hear about this? Would she see me thriving and regret her choices? The thought made me smile. I had taken a dark situation and turned it into something positive, something that would not only benefit others but would also serve as a reminder to her of what she threw away. I felt a sense of satisfaction that I hadn't thought possible just months before. I was on my way to not just success, but a kind of revenge that was sweeter than any act of revenge could ever be. I was finally in control of my life again. After the concert, the buzz of adrenaline lingered in the air. I received congratulatory messages from friends and colleagues who had attended, and I felt a swell of pride. But deep down, there was another feeling festering, a desire to confront Jane to let her know what she was missing. I knew that eventually I would have to face her again. It was inevitable. A few weeks later, I got my chance. I was out for drinks with some friends at a bar when I spotted her across the room. Jane was with a few of her musician friends, laughing loudly, her hair glowing under the dim lights. For a brief moment I hesitated. I had worked hard to move on, to build my own life, but seeing her brought a rush of conflicting emotions. I took a deep breath and approached her table. "Jane," I said, my voice steady despite the chaos swirling in my mind. She turned, her expression shifting from surprise to something unreadable. "Mark, what are you doing here?" she asked, her tone barely masking the discomfort. I just had a concert, I said, my heart pounding. You should have seen it. We raised over $5,000 for struggling artists. Her eyes widened and I could see a flicker of envy cross her face. Wow, that's great, she managed, but her voice sounded strained. I didn't know you were involved in that kind of stuff. Yeah, well, I guess you've been a bit busy with your own projects, I shot back, trying to keep my tone light, but the sting was unavoidable. What's that supposed to mean? She snapped, her facade cracking. You know exactly what I mean, Jane. You can't expect me to just forget everything that happened, I replied, feeling the anger rise. You cheated on me with some guy who couldn't even make a living playing music, and now you're pretending like you're living your best life. Her face flushed with indignation. You don't know anything about my life. Just because you're doing well doesn't mean I'm not struggling, she retorted, her voice rising. I watched as she tried to reassert herself, but it felt hollow. There was something sad in her eyes, a desperate attempt to maintain her pride. Struggling, huh? I said, forcing a smirk. You mean like the guy you cheated on me with? The tension thickened in the air, and for a moment I could almost see the gears turning in her head. Then she leaned in closer, her voice dropping to a whisper. I did what I did, Mark. I was lost. You were so busy with work that I felt neglected. It was a mistake, a moment of weakness. Her words ignited a mix of rage and sorrow within me. A moment of weakness, that's your excuse. I felt my heart racing and I struggled to keep my composure. You made a choice, Jane. You chose that guy over the life we built together. She opened her mouth, but no words came out. Instead, she looked away, her shoulders drooping slightly. I didn't mean to hurt you, she finally admitted, but it felt like a weak attempt at an apology, an excuse rather than a true acknowledgement of the pain she had caused. Right, so what now? Are you going to go back to pretending everything is fine while you're still struggling? I asked, and I immediately regretted the tone I took. I wanted to be above this, but the hurt was still fresh. I'm working on my music, okay? I'm trying to get better, she replied defensively. I could see it in her eyes. She was trying to convince herself as much as she was trying to convince me. Good luck with that, I said, my voice dripping with sarcasm. But you should know that I'm not waiting around for you to sort out your life. I'm moving on, Jane. I'm building my own future and I won't be looking back. Her expression faltered, and for the first time I saw a glimmer of regret. Mark, wait, she started, but I was already turning away. I didn't need her words anymore. I had my own life to live, and I wouldn't let her pull me back into her chaos. In the weeks that followed, I continued to focus on my own growth. I had hired a personal trainer, and I committed to a strict workout routine that helped me shed even more weight. I was feeling healthier, stronger, and more confident than I had in years, but part of me still struggled with the emotional aftermath of our encounter. I was angry that she still had any hold over my feelings, even after everything. I began to question whether my revenge plan was truly about her, or if it was just as much about proving something to myself. Then, one evening, I received a phone call that would change everything. It was from a friend who worked in local radio, letting me know that an opportunity had come up for me to host a segment about artists in the community. The chance to not only continue the charity work, but to also highlight other musicians' struggles felt like a sign. It was the perfect way to showcase the very things Jane had tried to dismiss. As I prepared for the new venture, I decided to reach out to Jane once more, not to confront her, but to propose something entirely different. Maybe it was time to show her that her choices had consequences, but also that I was not the bitter man she had left behind. If she thought she could walk away and leave me struggling, she was about to realize just how wrong she was. I had plans, and I was ready to execute them in ways she wouldn't expect. The radio segment was set to air in a couple of weeks, and the excitement around it kept my mind occupied. I was determined to go into this with a clear head and a focus on what I wanted to achieve, not just for myself, but for other artists who had faced similar struggles. I reached out to various musicians in the area, lining up interviews, and I felt a sense of purpose I hadn't experienced since before everything with Jane exploded. As I worked on my radio segment, I was also becoming more entrenched in the local music community. I attended open mic nights and music festivals, making connections and building relationships with artists who had faced rejection, struggle, and heartbreak. The more I immersed myself in this world, the more I realized how many people were dealing with the ups and downs of pursuing their dreams. Then one evening I received a message that caught me off guard. It was from Jane. "Hey, can we talk? I think we need to settle some things." My heart raced at the thought of her reaching out, but I had to remind myself of why I was doing this. I agreed to meet. We decided to meet at a coffee shop, a neutral setting that would allow us to talk without the pressure of our past looming over us. As I arrived, I saw her sitting at a corner table, her fingers anxiously tapping on the surface. She looked different, more subdued, almost vulnerable. "Hey," I said, keeping my tone neutral as I sat down. "Hi," she replied softly. The usual bravado was absent from her voice, replaced with a hesitance I hadn't seen before. "I've been thinking a lot about everything, Mark." I nodded, waiting for her to continue. I was unsure of what to expect, but I wasn't ready to back down. "What do you want to say?" She fidgeted, her eyes darting around the room. "I know I messed up and I don't expect you to forgive me, but I've been struggling to find my way back to music without drowning in stress and disappointment. I feel like I've lost my passion." Her admission surprised me. I had expected her to come in with a defensive tone, maybe some excuses, but instead, she seemed genuinely lost. "Jane, we've both been through a lot. You made choices that hurt me, and I'm not going to pretend that those didn't matter," I said, feeling the weight of my words. I know," she said, her voice trembling, "but I can't keep living like this. I thought I could just be free and find my own way, but all it's done is make me feel more lost. I thought you were doing fine, but now I see you thriving, and it makes me realize how much I threw away." Her honesty was unexpected. I wanted to feel anger, but instead I felt a pang of sympathy for her. "You can still find your way back to music, Jane. It's never too late for that. Could you help me?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "I want to do something that matters, and I know how to write songs, but I'm terrified of putting myself out there again." I hesitated. This was the moment I had envisioned, her coming to me, asking for help, realizing the consequences of her actions. But I also reminded myself of the pain she had caused, the emotional turmoil that had flipped my world upside down. "I don't know that I can be the one to help you," I replied cautiously. "It still hurts too much to think about us." She looked disappointed but nodded in understanding. "I get that, I really do, but I want to change. I want to make new memories instead of living in the past." There was something about her sincerity that made me reconsider. I had spent so much time plotting my own path to success, but maybe there was a way to help someone else in the process. "Okay, here's the deal," I said, my mind racing with possibilities. "I've got this radio segment coming up and I'm featuring struggling artists. If you're willing to put in the work, I can give you a platform to share your story and your music." Her eyes lit up with a mix of hope and surprise. "Really? You'd do that for me?" "It's not about you, Jane. It's about the music and the people who need a voice. If your music can help others like you, then that's what matters, but you need to take this seriously. No excuses." "I will, I swear," she exclaimed, the enthusiasm returning to her voice. "I've missed music so much. I forgot why I loved it in the first place." As we talked, I found myself caught in a whirlwind of emotions. I wanted Jane to acknowledge the hurt, but I also wanted her to find her passion again. This felt like a significant turning point, not just for her, but for me as well. After that meeting, we started working together. She sent me demos of her songs, and I helped her refine her sound and lyrics. It was strange being in that collaborative space again, but I was surprised at how much I enjoyed it. We laughed, reminisced, and even shared moments that felt just like old times, before everything fell apart. But beneath the surface, I was still aware of my original intentions. I was helping her find her voice, but I wanted her to see the contrast between our lives now. I wanted her to realize what she had lost and how far I had come since she had betrayed me. The day of the radio segment arrived, and I could sense the nervous energy bubbling up in Jane as we prepared to go on air. "You're going to do great," I reassured her, seeing the fear in her eyes. "Thanks, Mark. I just want to make an impact," she replied, her voice shaky. As we stepped into the studio, I felt a wave of anticipation wash over me. This was it, our chance to make a difference together, to showcase the artists and their stories, and ultimately to prove that we can rise from our failures. Even if it meant facing the ghosts of our past, I was ready to embrace the future, both for myself and for Jane. Little did I know that this collaboration would change everything in ways I never expected. The next few hours would put both of us to the test and force us to confront the reality of our journey. The airwaves would soon carry our stories, but the truth would reveal itself in ways we couldn't yet imagine. As the show began, the studio buzzed with energy. The host, a charismatic DJ named Sam, welcomed us warmly. Today, we're diving into the world of music and the stories behind the artists. I'm thrilled to have Mark, a local entrepreneur, and Jane, a talented musician who's ready to make her comeback. I felt a surge of pride as I introduced Jane to the audience. She looked nervous but excited, her eyes glimmering with determination. It was a stark contrast to the woman I had confronted months earlier, and I wondered if she truly understood how far she had come. As we settled into our discussion, I could see Jane gaining confidence. She spoke candidly about her struggles, the rejection, the moments of self-doubt, and her desire to reconnect with her passion for music. The more she shared, the more the listeners could resonate with her story. I felt a sense of satisfaction in watching her thrive in this moment. "Jane, what has been the biggest challenge for you?" Sam asked, leaning in with genuine interest. "Honestly, it's been accepting that failure is part of the journey," she replied, her voice steady. "I thought that if I didn't succeed immediately, I was a failure, but I've learned that every setback is a stepping stone to finding my true voice." As she spoke, I couldn't help but reflect on my own journey. I had faced rejection and heartbreak, but I had turned that pain into something productive. Jane was doing the same, and I found myself cheering her on, despite the history between us. After the interview, as the show wrapped up, the host invited Jane to perform a song live. I had no idea she was going to do that, but the spark in her eyes told me she was ready. "I'd like to share a new song I wrote during this process. It's about resilience and finding your way back," she said, her voice resonating with emotion. As she strummed her guitar and began to sing, the room fell silent, captivated by her raw talent. I watched as she poured her heart into every word, and I could see that she was truly in her element. This was the Jane I remembered, the passionate artist who lit up the room with her voice. When she finished, the studio erupted in applause, and I felt a swell of pride for her. She had stepped up and faced her fears, and in doing so, she had reminded me of the person I had initially fallen in love with. After the show, as we stepped out into the bright sunlight, Jane turned to me, her eyes shining with gratitude. "Thank you for this opportunity, Mark. I needed this more than I realized." "Just remember, it's about the music and the impact it has on others," I replied, keeping my tone light. "You've got to keep pushing yourself and stay true to your art." We spent the next few weeks working closely together, and as we did, I began to notice a shift in our dynamic. Jane was no longer just the woman who had betrayed me. She was becoming a partner in this creative endeavor. We spent late nights perfecting her songs, discussing lyrics, and even bouncing ideas off each other for future projects. But beneath the surface, the bitterness I had initially harbored was still simmering. I couldn't shake the thought that while I was helping her rebuild, I was also watching her transform into the woman I had once loved so deeply. It was confusing, and I struggled to reconcile those feelings. As the days passed, I began to realize that my initial motivations for revenge had morphed into something much more complex. I wasn't just helping Jane, I was rediscovering parts of myself in the process. I had gained confidence, success, and a renewed sense of purpose, and I was genuinely proud of what I was creating. But just when I thought we were making progress, an unexpected setback came crashing in. One evening, I received a message from a mutual friend who had been in touch with Jane's ex-lover, the musician she had cheated on me with. "Hey, I don't know if you've heard, but he's back in town. Apparently, he's planning to reach out to Jane," the message read. My stomach twisted at the thought. I had worked so hard to help Jane find her footing again, and now this ghost from the past threatened to pull her back into a world of chaos. I felt a surge of protectiveness over her, but I also felt the old anger bubbling up. How could she possibly entertain the idea of reconnecting with him after everything? That night, I confronted Jane about it. "I heard he's back in town," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "Are you going to talk to him?" Her expression shifted from surprise to defensiveness. "Mark, just because he's back doesn't mean I want anything to do with him. I've moved on. I'm focused on my music now." "Are you sure about that?" I pressed my voice, rising slightly. "You don't want to get pulled back into that mess, Jane. You've come so far, and he's the reason you were lost in the first place." "I can handle this," she shot back, her frustration evident. "I have to face my past to move forward. It's part of the process." The tension in the room thickened as we stood facing each other, emotions raw and unfiltered. I realized that I was torn between wanting to protect her and respecting her autonomy. But the thought of her getting involved with him again sent a chill down my spine. "I just want what's best for you," I said, softer this time. "I know you're trying to navigate this, but please think it through. You've built something incredible, and I don't want to see you throw it all away." She looked at me, her expression softening slightly. "I appreciate your concern, but I need to make my own choices, Mark. I can't keep running away from my past." In that moment, I understood that no matter how hard I tried, I couldn't control her decisions. I had to trust that she would make the right call, but I also knew I wouldn't sit idly by if it meant watching her fall back into a toxic situation. The next few days were tense as I wrestled with my feelings. I wanted to be supportive, but I also felt powerless. I kept the lines of communication open with Jane, reminding her of her worth and the progress she had made. But in the back of my mind, I couldn't shake the feeling that the specter of her past was looming, threatening to disrupt everything we had worked for. Then one evening, I received a call from Jane that would change everything. "Can we meet? I need to talk," she said, her voice shaky with uncertainty. "Of course," I replied, my heart racing. Whatever she had to say, I was ready to listen. But deep down, I was bracing for the storm that might follow. The moment of truth was upon us, and I knew that the choices we made in the coming hours would shape the future of our relationship, both as individuals and as collaborators. As I made my way to the coffee shop where Jane wanted to meet, a wave of anxiety washed over me. My mind raced with possibilities. What could she possibly want to talk about? I had been preparing myself for the worst, but I also hoped that whatever was coming would make sense of the chaos we had faced together. When I arrived, Jane was already seated, her fingers nervously drumming on the table. She looked up as I approached, her expression a mix of determination and uncertainty. "Thanks for coming," she said, her voice low. "Of course. What's going on?" I asked, settling into the chair across from her. She took a deep breath, her eyes searching mine as if she was looking for the right words. "I've been thinking a lot about everything, the radio segment, the music, and the past. It's been overwhelming," she admitted. "And I can't deny that my ex has reached out. He wants to meet." My heart sank at her words. "And what do you want, Jane?" I asked, my tone steady but my emotions flaring beneath the surface. "Do you want to see him?" "I don't know," she said, her voice tinged with frustration. "Part of me wants to just put the past behind me and move on, but another part of me feels like I need to face him to truly close that chapter." I was silent for a moment, absorbing her words. I understood where she was coming from, but it didn't make it any easier. "You've worked so hard to rebuild your life and your music. Don't let him pull you back into a dark place, Jane." "I know," she said, her voice trembling. "But I need to make my own choices, just like you told me. I can't live my life in fear of what could happen. I need to take control." Her determination struck a chord within me. I had spent so much time trying to protect her, yet I realized she had to walk this path on her own, regardless of my feelings. "You're right, it's your life," I said. "But promise me that no matter what happens, you'll remember how far you've come. Don't let anyone take that away from you, not even him." "I promise," she replied, her eyes brightening with conviction. "This time, I won't let myself be swayed. I'm ready to confront my past, but I also want to build a future I want to keep moving forward with or without him." As we talked, I felt the air shift between us. Jane was stronger than I had given her credit for, and my admiration for her was growing. "You've got this, Jane. Just remember to stay true to yourself," I encouraged her. "Thank you, Mark. I mean it," she said, her expression softening. "You've helped me more than you realize. I didn't just lose my way, I lost sight of who I was. But you've helped me find my passion again. I want to share that with the world." For the first time in a long time, I felt a sense of hope for her. If she genuinely believed in herself, she could overcome this. While there was still a part of me that was wary of her ex, I had to trust that Jane would make the right decision. As our conversation continued, I could see the spark of creativity igniting within her. We discussed new projects, ideas for songs, and the message she wanted to convey through her music. The tension that had previously surrounded us faded, replaced by a renewed sense of purpose. We were no longer just two people with a painful history. We were collaborators, allies in a shared passion. When it was time to leave, Jane smiled at me, her eyes shining with determination. "I'll keep you updated on everything," she said. "Please do," I replied. "And remember, you're not alone in this." The days turned into weeks, and I kept my promise to support Jane while she dealt with her past. She took the brave step of meeting her ex, but instead of allowing him to pull her back, she confronted him. She shared her journey, her struggles, and how far she had come. He may have been a part of her past, but he no longer defined her future. When she called me after the meeting, I could hear the relief in her voice. "I did it, Mark. I stood my ground, and I feel like I can finally move on." I couldn't help but smile. "That's amazing, Jane. I'm so proud of you." As she began to find her voice again, things started to shift for me as well. I continued to grow in my career, and the radio segment became a platform for local artists, amplifying their stories and struggles just as we had discussed. Our collaboration blossomed, and Jane and I developed a dynamic that felt both professional and deeply respectful. In the midst of all this, something unexpected began to unfold. While we were no longer the couple we once were, I found myself feeling drawn to her in a way I hadn't anticipated. I admired her resilience, her passion, and the way she had transformed herself. It was almost as if the past had served as a crucible for our growth. One evening, we sat together in my living room, listening to her latest track, a song that encapsulated her journey and our shared experiences. The air was thick with unspoken words, and I felt the weight of everything that had passed between us. "Jane, I've been thinking," I started, my heart racing. "About what?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "About us. I know we've been through a lot, but I can't help but feel that maybe we could explore what's next." Her eyes widened in surprise. "You mean like as more than friends?" I nodded, feeling a mix of excitement and apprehension. "Yeah, I don't know what that looks like, but I think we should see where it leads." She smiled softly, and I could see a flicker of hope in her expression. "I'd like that, Mark. I really would, but let's take it slow. We both deserve that." That night we began to forge a new path together, one based on mutual respect, understanding, and a shared love for music. While the memory of our past would forever linger, it no longer defined us. Instead, it became a foundation upon which we built a future filled with promise. I learned that betrayal can lead to growth, and sometimes the most profound change comes from the pain we endure. Jane had taught me that life is about embracing the journey, not just the destination. And as we moved forward, I couldn't help but feel that we were both finally on our way to becoming the people we were meant to be.